So here's where I wanted to start the show today before JP bullied me into an emotional open. On Saturday, and this is not a new sports radio topic, but Saturday is a perfect example of the path that has been the separate path that BYU football and Utah football have been on now for the better part of a decade, but it's manifesting itself in a very undeniable way on Saturday. And I'm not bringing up this topic to run one program down or lift another one up. It just kind of struck me as I was reading around this morning, and KSL had an article about how you can access BYU football on Saturday. Long story short, you have to have ESPN Plus, which is a separate subscription fee than either ESPN, ESPN2, News, Class, whatever. Like the ESPN bundle that you get on, say, DirecTV or whatever your TV provider is, ESPN Plus is different. You got to pay $5 a month if you want to watch BYU on Saturday. And oh, by the way, BYU's playing Toledo on Saturday. And oh, by the way, it's at 10 a.m. Half of you are going to be asleep from going out the night before, or you're going to be doing honeydews or yard work before you realize, oh my gosh, BYU's playing. And then you're going to say to yourself, it's Toledo. And then you're going to say to yourself, and I don't even have ESPN Plus. Later on that night, at 8 o'clock local, which is late for the East Coast folk, Pac-12 After Dark, Utah is on FS1. Carried nationally, although Dish Network apparently dropped it today. A massive, massive broadcast team is going to be in town. The boys from the Pac-12 Network are going to be in town, Yogi Roth and all those dudes. And they're playing Washington State, a team that was nationally ranked a week ago, and a team that has a head coach who's a national celebrity, and it's a Pac-12 game, and it's going to be sold out at Rice-Eccles Stadium. And the eyes of the country are going to be on that game because it's the last, Pac-12 After Dark game, and I know some East Coast folk, again, will probably be asleep. But I would imagine, and I don't know this to be the case for sure, but I would venture to guess that an equal amount, if not more, BYU fans will be watching Utah-Washington State on FS1 at 8 o'clock, as opposed to BYU Toledo at 10 a.m. on ESPN Plus. Because, again, it's early in the morning, it's Toledo, and look, I know they can run the football. I've read all the stuff. I know about Colorado State, and I know that they're not a horrible football team, but it's Toledo. And it's 10 a.m., and it's on ESPN Plus. I would venture to guess an equal amount, if not more, BYU fans, just out of convenience, and maybe interest too, because I think it'll be a good game, are going to fire up FS1 at 8 o'clock to watch Utah-Washington State. And so as I was preparing for the show today, and this is topical because of the news about the scheduling, Mark Harlan being able to capture a home-and-home with Florida, which is a great, great get for Utah. I mean, great get in a lot of different ways. And BYU, UCF, and Rice, and some additions they're making too. And Tom Homo's doing everything he can while carrying the mantle of potentially the toughest job in all of college football. I wouldn't want to be Tom Homo. I like Tom a lot, and I respect him a lot, but that's a tough gig, and he's doing the best he can to schedule good opponents and also at the same time try to make sure that his team's heads aren't smashed in after playing 4 P5 opponents to start the year. It's tough. But the dichotomy between these two programs is startling for a guy like me who grew up in an era of BYU dominance and BYU national relevance. Not just BYU dominance over Utah. Conference championship after conference championship. National championship 84. You know the drill. Outland Award winner. Heisman Trophy winner. A legendary college coach. Not just a great coach for our state here, like a dude that is respected across the country and still is to this day. And the topic of the two programs taking different paths, again, it's not new because two things happened that made this unavoidable. Number one, and I've said this before and I'll continue to say it, the day Kyle Whittingham said no to his alma mater and said yes to the University of Utah is the day these paths began. And number two is obvious when Larry Scott called Dr. Chris Hill and said, we want you in our conference. And BYU's phone didn't ring. And then afterwards, it was maybe the Big 12 will come calling. And then they did for a minute, And we know the story there. BYU had some elements that the Big 12 found problematic, and there was no marriage. I'm not even sure how much they dated before they went their separate ways. But it's pretty rare. Like, for the first month of the season, BYU played Utah. Then they went down to SEC country and had a win. That was a miracle in double overtime against Tennessee. And everybody in the country started talking about Zach Wilson, the nickname Mormon Manziel. Credit our guy RJ for that.
I was going to say.
Look, that's the one part of our relationship that, I don't know, man. When I saw you tattle on me on Twitter, I'm like, okay, what's this dude really all about? But you're right. Credit our guy for the nickname that a lot of people adopted. Week later, another win over USC in overtime. A game that a lot of people were watching because of the time slot and the television coverage and the interest in both brands. BYU's an undeniable brand, and so is USC. A week later, primetime, beautiful day. The type of day that if you're BYU, if you're Tom Holmoe, you want people around the world to turn on ESPN and say, oh my gosh, I've never seen a college football venue like that. It's set right in the backdrop of those mountains. That is gorgeous. Now, the performance wasn't awesome. Washington smashes BYU. But we all have known for quite some time that this week was coming. And it just kind of hit me across the face today when I was doing the prep for Utah Wazoo and then looked at BYU Toledo and saw that KSL article asking BYU fan, will you get ESPN Plus to watch BYU on Saturday against Toledo at 10 a.m.? And then in primetime later that night, Utah is going to play Washington State on FS1. So, JP, it's one of those things where we know the drill. This isn't surprising. But when I was kind of dissecting both of the storylines from the games today, it just hit me. I was like, I cannot believe that we got here based on when I grew up and how dominant BYU was then.
And even when I grew up, they were very dominant. They were good. Max Hall, John Beck, Brandon Doman before that, Luke Staley.
Yeah.
Luke Staley
Doak
was
Walker Award, yep.
Cold.
Yeah, he was.
Growing up, watching that BYU team. And this is the price of independence. Bronco Mendenhall, now that he's no longer at BYU, he will shout it from a mountaintop out there in Virginia about how he saw this happening, where scheduling after that first four, it gets a little difficult.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have to play UMass. You're going to have to play New Mexico State mixed in a couple of years. You're going to have to play bad teams to fill out the schedule, and ESPN isn't going to want to put you on those type of games. Now, if you're a BYU fan, you say, well, how many homes is the Pac-12 Network in? That would be your response.
Right.
Would be, well, at least we have that national TV deal at the front end,
yep,
and we can continue on that. Utah fans sometimes get stuck on the Pac-12 Network, and we have the same amount of viewers that we're on looking at ESPN+. I think that's the only silver lining that a BYU Cougar can look at right now.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt. So, I mean, look, I would encourage BYU fans to shell out the $5, watch your team on Saturday. But again, a lot of you are going to be sleeping, running errands, maybe coaching your kids' football team or whatever, before you realize BYU's playing. And then you're going to say, but it's Toledo. And then you're going to say, I don't even have ESPN+. And then later that night, FS1, channel that most everybody has, is going to have Utah, Washington State in prime time. So just interesting dichotomy between the two schools.